Well, let me do my little quick intro here. Welcome everybody to the Esports. What do I even call my show? Actually, time out here. Coach Talk? Welcome everybody to the Collegiate Esports Talk Show. I'm Coach Antor, and today we have a lot of topics to cover.
I can't move on till I let go. I feel so lost.
Let's start talking about NECC. Let's talk about the NECC. So the NECC, there's a lot of background here that I don't think the common person knows. And I don't know if it's the fault of the NECC or if it is them. Knowing that it might bring up some controversial communication or not, etc. I'm going to close some tabs here. But like I said, me and Gloob sat on a call, talked through some of my questions, and I got a much better look into the NECC. But here's my overview. I'm going to try to keep this kind of organized to the best of my knowledge. But the NECC, which is now, so here's their piece, first piece of information that you might not know. The NECC, as it is today, the esports part of it, is actually now known as, or called, the National Esports Collegiate Conference. So in 2019, the NECC, the New England Collegiate Conference, was overlooking this esports conference, and it was under a traditional athletic conference. And then in 2019, it split. Basically, the argument that's been presented to me and others is that the rebranding of NECC was the split, but I don't think that split was communicated very well. And it's split completely from the NECC, although the leader of the NECC, the traditional sports conference, is technically still the commissioner of the National Esports Collegiate Conference. The NECC has about 200 schools competing in it. So they are they're a big one. They're continuing to grow year over year. What separates them currently in the space is their ability to offer competition to offer more even competition, an opportunity to compete to teams that might not be in that top echelon or the upper echelon of competition. So they've done a really good job at creating division structures to allow maybe a collegiate team who's a gold Rocket League team to find good, fair competition for the entire year. They don't have to get stomped by Northwood or St. Clair all year round or all year long. And I think that's a huge, it's a huge positive. A lot of people are looking for that. I think a lot of the other orgs who aren't offering that are looking at how to implement that. I think Lube would say that he implements it the best way, and it's not easy to repeat. I would semi-agree with the exact way that they're going about it. They are a league that charges to compete, although there is a free option. If you go and compete in the NECC for free, you don't have access to the national playoff, which is where the prizing is. So basically you can pay for free, but you don't get the benefits of the prizing at the end. And part of this is because 10% of the dues go to the prize pool, which I think can create some headaches for teams as well, because there might not always be a clear communication on exactly the size of those prize pools until later on in the season. So I think there's the overview. As for competition, one of the questions I asked, is it true that teams can compete without paying fees, giving up prizing opportunities? He said yes. I was worried that basically someone could win a prize pool, but if they didn't pay the dues, they would not get that prize. But that's not the case. They're actually just not even allowed to be in the tournament that has the prize pool. So how much is it? I don't know. I don't remember. Gloob's in here. He can tell you how much it is. Is it like a 1,000 per game title or something? 1K per school for unlimited teams. Okay. So 1,000 for all games. Which is, so in comparison, NACE is 2,500 for the year. I think ECAC might be around that 1,000 something. So it's very competitive pricing when we look at the other options in the space when we talk about national competition. I asked we talked a little bit about Riot licensing. They have a very similar structure to what NECC can do. It seems like they have according to Gloob, have a decent relationship with developers. I'm always very apprehensive I'm always a little skeptical on relationships with developers because everyone wants to be friends and always says they're friends with developers. And I think a frustration in this space is the inability to see some of these licensing agreements. So that's I take that with a grain of salt. They haven't been shut down at this point, to my knowledge. So nice job. But most of my questions and concerns actually were focused on the business and operations standpoint of NECC. From my perspective, there was some significant difference in the pay structure of their commissioner versus the people actually running the conference, especially on the esports side. I think one of the things that a couple people at NECC pointed out was they said my tweet about the difference in salary from the commissioner of NECC and Gloobinator was misleading. I stand by my tweet, and I believe it's exactly true. And the fact that they separated the two organizations does not really solve my concern. But I think the interesting part we're going to talk here a little bit is kind of the business structure of the NECC, because I think not a lot of people know this kind of inner working of what can be possible in collegiate, and how people and individuals and companies can kind of carve out some value for them and their investors and etc. So this will be fun. So the esports NECC split from the athletics NECC. I think it's important to note that from what I've been told, that when that split happened, the National Esports Collegiate Conference was created into a nonprofit. So I haven't seen the filings. I haven't seen any IRS filings, but because it happened in late 2019, those tax filings might not be public yet. So maybe in the next year or so, we'll actually have kind of verification on some of those filings. I love looking at IRS tax filings for nonprofits. I really do. It's very eye-opening. You can see a lot of information. There's a couple nonprofits in the space that I could do a full episode on, but that's for a different day. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt there that they are a nonprofit. I'm kind of following a little bit of the chat, but yeah, I'm kind of focusing on this. But here's the kicker. There is this nonprofit organization that basically runs the tournament. But in addition to that, Gloob and Jacob, who's the commissioner of the NECC, both NECCs, created a for-profit business. I don't know what the name of that for-profit business. It doesn't matter. But they created a for-profit business on top of this nonprofit, and that for-profit business owns broadcast and licensing rights to the NECC competition. In my quick research of how like the Big Ten operates, this is how, from my understanding, this is how the Big Ten is set up, like the Big Ten Conference versus the Big Ten Network, whereas the Big Ten Network is a for-profit entity. It's actually owned 51% by Fox Sports, and then the other 49% is owned by the conference. But so it's not like it's all above board. We've seen it in traditional athletics before, but I think it's an important distinction, especially when the same people are running all of it. And I think that's important. They split that for-profit business between the two of them. And there's obviously, from my perspective, a profit. There's a profit opportunity here, an investment opportunity here for both of those individuals and anyone who now or in the future has holdings in this in this for-profit business. I think, and to be fair, I'm pretty sure like this is probably similar. Well, the same concept and profiting opportunity or money making opportunity can be seen on the NECC side as well. You see CSL kind of owning some of that broadcasting. They split the revenue between CSL and NECC, whereas the revenue would be just for the NECC. I don't know what money goes where, if they're pushing money back and forth. I don't know that. I'm not an accountant. I don't have access to those books. There's just a lot of opportunity to make things cloudy and not above board. And I think that's important to kind of distinguish. So that's kind of the business structure. So there's for-profit NECC who has the broadcasting rights, who can go sell the finals of NECC to some entity to broadcast wherever they want. And then there's the nonprofit, which is the tournament that most of you all as directors and coaches are involved in. I wanted to dig a little bit deeper in the board of directors role for the nonprofit. So the nonprofit has a board of directors. There's actually at least one of them in chat right now. And I've been told the answer to my question of, can you describe the role of board of directors and what they oversee? The answer was technically they have oversight over everything, but they have not taken up that responsibility as of yet. From my understanding, they've been acting more of an advisory role, answering questions that might come up about competition where the NECC should head. But beyond that, have had very little oversight, which from my perspective as a director and looking at nonprofits and how some of the other nonprofits are running, I think is a question. I don't know if it's a concern, but it's a question. I think the other part of that is, to my knowledge, those board of directors members were appointed by Gloob, which in my opinion is kind of a conflict of interest. I think in most nonprofits, the board of directors often is the person in charge of the person running things. So for NECC, the board of directors of NECC has full autonomy to fire Michael Brooks if they see he's not fitting office. Within the NECC, I don't see that as a potential or a possibility. There might be some, like if things got to the court or something, sure, maybe at some point the board of directors could oust some of these folks at the NECC, but that's not the case currently. And I think that is a concern, because we can throw around the idea of nonprofit board of directors all we want, but in practice, that's not what I'm seeing is their actual role. Sean, who's actually on the board of directors of both NECC and the NECC, says, I don't really think any of us on the board know what the role of structure of the company is, to be honest. I was invited in and joined to advise and help steer things in the direction that made sense for programs like me. ABXY says executive directors usually bring potential board members to nonprofits. Yes, to some extent. I know with NECC, the board of directors are voted on by members. They're not the executive director appointing them. And I think that's a key distinction. I'm not super familiar with how all nonprofits operate. I'm sure there are some nonprofits out there who the executive director appoints. But it's something that I would be wary of as a coach in the space, because I think one important thing that I want to make sure is that I'm not operating in a organization where one person has control over everything. And that if a mistake were to be made, or if a bad decision was decided, how is that going to be resolved? How is that going to be changed before it's implemented? Yeah. So that's some of my concern with the board of directors. The other concern that I have truly, and it hasn't been brought up by anyone yet, but if Fiona finds out, y'all are going to find out, is all of their board of directors are men. And that I see as a massive problem. And I'm hoping that some of that gets resolved. I think creating a much more full bylaws constitution for the NECC is an important first step, and then describing how the board of directors is kind of picked and their tenures, etc., I think is a massive need. Kind of one of those things that should be earlier on in the process here. Gloob says there's 4 open board spots that are still haven't been filled. Well, there you go. So next question I saw on the NECC website the CSMG logo. So whenever I see a licensing company for collegiate athletics on a website, my alarm bells go off everywhere because they are everywhere. All right, these licensing companies are. I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but they are literally taking over all of collegiate esports, and they're going to be the ones profiting off of most of this. So whether that's good or bad, who knows? It's the more hands-on they get, I think the worse for all of us and for our students. But that's just my opinion. But I did see the CSMG logo on the NECC website, so I asked Gloob, can you describe NECC's relationship with the CSMG? I see they're listed on the NECC website. From what I've been told, basically, CSMG did something similar as they did to ECAC, although ECAC is a lot more in the weeds with CSMG. And for background on this, CSMG currently partners with ECAC to sell memberships for the ECAC. So, like, I met some of the top people at CSMG at Orlando in one of their regional events. They followed up, wanted to get on a call. I got on a call, and the entire thing was a pitch for the ECAC, which left a really sour taste in my mouth because that's such a hook and switch deal, in my opinion. I was asking, basically, CSMG had purchased the rights at some point to sell sponsorships or partnerships for the NECC. So another one of these plays of some of these licensing companies is basically to own the rights to go sell ads for some of these leagues. I think if that ever gets too big, that the developers are going to step in and stop that from happening because there's some questionable stuff with that. But that's kind of what they did. Supposedly, I don't know if that partnership's still going. Esports U stepped in somewhere. Don't know the details of that. But again, there's a common occurrence right now happening, especially in the NECC of the potential looking at the broadcast and licensing of competition and to profit off of that. And I think there's significant problems here that we're going to see if something gets picked up by anyone, because these broadcasts have logos on them. And at the end of the day, the licensing companies want those logos. Like, that's the value that they're getting. It's not the competition. Like, I'm sorry, you're not going to sell a lot for the 6 players from Northwood playing the 6 players from Maryville, but you're going to sell the Northwood logo. And I think that's a definite problem. And it's not just NECC. Like, that's happening at every step of the way here. Collegiate, all of it. All of them are profiting off of logos that they don't technically have the rights to, or the rights to sell, in my opinion. So I think that's one of those things coming on the horizon that I think is for all of us to be very aware of, and especially those coaches and directors at big D1 schools. Yeah, I think everyone needs to take a step back and start doing some research on some of this stuff. I did ask what the entry rate for their game managers was. I had been told at one point that they were volunteers. From my understanding, they're not. They make about $1,000 per semester for working one night per week. I don't know the full calculation on that because I've never participated in NECC, but doing some quick math and quick guessing, it seems fairly fair. But again, I could be totally off in my calculations. I don't know what goes into game manager. I'm assuming they're working a lot more than I initially said. but they say they're paying people, which is a good positive. Yeah. I when I got on the call with Gloob, I honestly wanted it to be what I thought was going to happen. It was going to be a real spicy episode, but like I told him, it wasn't. He kind of ruined the spice with his answers, which is good. Like I'm glad that NECC is functioning in such a good way, or in such a way. I think there are a lot of questions here, and I think people competing in the NECC should be asking some of these questions. But from my initial kind of investigation, I would say that there's not anything that's like overly concerning, in my opinion, at this point in time. I think there are always going to be questions. There are a lot of bad actors in the space. Thankfully, most of the leagues that were really bad have kind of gotten pushed out. NECC has gotten a lot of love. People really like competing in the NECC. They offer a little bit of a competitive advantage in how they do things. But they're also not going to be for everyone. There's going to be some philosophies that a league has that might not align with your philosophies. They might, we all have our own reasons for picking a school or picking a tournament or not picking a tournament. And I think that's important. And some of those reasons some of those concerns that I have are probably some of the reasons why I haven't picked to compete in NECC at this point, but it's also because I don't think we need to be competing in 5 different leagues. Like I'm looking for a regional league and a national league. And right now NACE is a really good option in my opinion for us. I think on the NACE point, like I could do a whole entire episode on NACE without spilling anything that I'm not supposed to spill. I know. But I think what's really, really important for people to realize that they don't realize yet or have not realized is that NACE was started by the NAIA. And if you don't know who the NAIA is, go find out. They're basically the competitor to the NCAA. And they're heavily supported still by the NAIA. So if you are an NAIA school, all I can say is you're a coach or director at an NAIA school. All I can say is I would highly recommend you to be in NACE. And I highly recommend you get in leadership to help steer the direction. Because even long term, NACE is probably what you're going to be kind of stuck with, even if the NCAA were to adopt. Yes, NAIA conferences have esports as well. That's good. I know the WAC, which is where I was at Aquinas, had it. And that was one of the main reasons I got involved in NACE and stayed involved in NACE when I was at Aquinas, is like, it's an NAIA school. Like the head of the NAIA is on the board of directors of NACE. Like it's very intertwined everywhere. And I don't think that's talked about enough. There's a lot of sustainability like characteristics in that organization right now. Sean says NECC is going through growing pains just like everyone else. Nothing seems overly sketch to me. I would agree to most of the extent. I think something that needs to be continued to kind of realize is that NECC, like most other organizations, is underfunded. They're trying to do their best, but I also want to make sure in that process that they're not taking advantage of other folks at cheap to no cost. And I think that's a major, major problem in the space. And selling the promise of future riches or future payouts or future whatever, or exposure or experience, like that is not the answer. Like if that's what an organization's doing, get them out. There are better options or more sustainable options for the students that are working and for the individuals working, in my opinion. And that's where my concern lies. But like I said, a lot of people are liking NECC. A lot of people, a lot of positive stuff out of the ECAC, although it almost seems like I wonder if the ECAC and NECC can kind of live in the space together, because I don't know if there's a lot of positives or negatives that one offers that the other one doesn't. And again, I think at some point, a lot of us are going to realize we don't need to be in 10 different leagues. And I don't think it's sustainable or beneficial to our students. Sean says we cap it at 3 games per week, generally with 2 practices additionally. That seems to be a sweet spot. If it seems to be a sweet spot for you, go for it. I think I'm pushing back for like 2 matches tops per week. What I'm going to be doing is trying to focus more on developing talent rather than competing in so many things. I think nobody's really nailed the answer on how to develop talent, and that's continuing to be my one of my biggest gripes with the space. Is like no one's developing talent. Everyone's just recruiting it, and that's a problem. More games and practices seems kind of harsh, though, for improvement. I would agree with that. I think for some game titles it works. Like I know Rocket League, like you can have 2 matches in one night, and that can get your 2 matches. It's fine. But like League of Legends, 3 is a lot. NECC generic typist says NECC is very much what you see is what you get. My students like the ability to play against similarly ranked schools at a D3 level. NECC is very solid for the value. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's, like I said, there's a lot of opportunity in the NECC. I think it solves a problem that we had in the space. I think other organizations are going to be moving towards trying to address those concerns, but I don't know if they'll do it at the same level. We'll see. I think time will only tell. Pico says, yeah, I want us to develop more and not have to play so many matches and feel that not much better with more practices. Yeah, I mean, my first year we did like 5 different leagues, and like we weren't even practicing. Like we maybe have like 1 scrim block a week, but we were doing match after match, and like no one's getting better. We're just getting burnt out. Wiki says, I'm with Antor, 2 matches, 2 traditional practices, and 1 film practice is what I'm shooting for. Yeah, I'm aiming for 5 days of practice / matches next year. Previously, I've hit around 4 or 3, which is really low. I'm aiming for 5, and one of those being a match day is what I'm kind of going to try. Travis Epic says, we try to cap our teams at around 25 to 30 matches a season, or a year per season, similar to some traditional sports. Sometimes I want my players to play less. True. Sean says 3 is rare, though, for us. Rocket League might be the only game where we have 3. Most of our others are NACE plus NECC or NACE plus a Dev League. Yeah. CU Esports says, how would you address games and practices with only have 1 coach? That's a good question. Oftentimes, in every place I've been, I've found volunteers to help coach, whether it's an alumni or a local person who wants to get involved in esports when I didn't have the budget to pay a coach. But I've also had instances where I leaned on a mature, knowledgeable captain to run practices while I was present. They're all options. I mean, you got to kind of figure out what's best for you. I obviously have my own bias and recommendations on some of that, but what works at my school might not work with your program at your school. Sean says, I would find volunteer coaches or work study coaches. Building a program around 1 coach for multiple games is not sustainable. I would agree with that.
I can't move on till I let go. I feel so lost, never at home. Need to be strong every breath, oh, 'cause I can't move on till I let go.